سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. أما بعد, Assalamu alaikum. Inshallah, for your attentiveness and also forgiveness, inshallah. I have an injury on the side of my mouth. I've been trying to nurse it. Alhamdulillah, got it training. So you can't leave out of here and say like Brother Tariq was getting mopped up on the mats and getting hurt. And just, it happens. Costs and taxes of doing business, inshallah, training. Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. The Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was sitting with another Sahaba, and another one of the Sahaba, this man, he passed them while they were sitting together. And the Sahaba that was with the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said to him, after the man got out of range of hearing them, and he said to the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, man, I love that brother, man. Right? We said that many a time. Maybe a brother's name is mentioned, or you think of him, and you're like, man, I love him, right? It's deep elation and just joy. However, that brother made that other person feel, but we say that sometimes. We're like, man, that's my dude, that's my A1. And so he says this to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked him a question, and he said, have you told him? Like, did you tell him? I know you said that you love him, but did you tell him that you love him? And he said, no, I haven't told him. He said, no, yalla, go tell him that you love him. And so he goes to the man and he says, I love you for Allah's sake, right? Uhibbuk lillah, right? Fillah. I love you for Allah's sake. And then the brother replies back to him, he says, and the one in whom sake you love me for, pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, may He love you, inshallah. And so many times, myself, others have to stand here. I'm particularly speaking myself. We skip over maybe exclaiming or explaining and extolling this sort of love that we have. And so first and foremost, before I pass away, inshallah, I would say, I love you all for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sake. And for the nur of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, with every bit of sincerity that I can muster in my heart. And why is this not a light thing for me? It is because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's because of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and it is because of you all's connection, you all's consistency in arriving here and being obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and holding tight to the covenants of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Because of you all's dutifulness and worship and consistency in that, your needy brother, your poor brother can arrive and be here and take part in praying and learning and worshiping, all the things that we take part of. And for that alone, just that alone, inshallah, I love you all, right? To every fiber of me, inshallah. There's another part of that if you love somebody, you're obligated. You're obligated to tell them the truth. No holds barred. Right? We shouldn't lie to the people that we love. Right? They should be the people we are most honest and most forthcoming about the reality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the reality of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So if I can, I want to share just a small secret with us all and myself. And that is, none of us, not a single one of us, are going to enter Jannah because of the good that we've done. So I want us to think back to the time when the fundraiser, we just had a fundraiser, so it's good to remark about, when the fundraiser told those to raise a hand for a certain amount, and you knew for a fact that this was going to leave you penniless. You only had 2 nickels to rub together in your pocket, right? But you gave for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sake. And after you gave, it put something in your heart and you felt good about it. Like, I did this mountainous thing for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. By account of that, and because of that, even though it was something mountainous in our hearts, we won't get into Jannah because of it. Likewise, right? Go back to money. You got a sister, auntie, or something like that, and they need a nephew that has something to be paid for and taken care of. We get real slick when we take care of something, right? You know, I know he needed money to do X, Y, Z. You just send a little slide text. I got it covered. Don't worry about it. Right? It's done. Now I got nephew. It's taken care of. Even because of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not let us into Jannah because of those particular actions. Many a thing that we do that we hold in high esteem in our heart, after the fact, after doing it, even if it pained us to do it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not let us in Jannah because of it. But it is only through what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's overwhelming, all-encompassing Rahma, His mercy, that we are allowed into Jannatul Firdaus. There's a riwayah about a Jewish man who spent 500 years of his life worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Angel Jibreel alayhi salam explains that this man, on Yawm al-Qiyamah, he will come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he will go, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, Bismillah, like, udkhul Jannah, into Jannah, right, by my mercy. And the man stop in his tracks. Now I want you to understand this scene. The man is given entry into Jannah. Case closed. But instead of rushing into the gates, instead of rushing into endless happiness, endless felicity, he stops in his tracks. And he asks Allah, why not by my deeds? I worshiped you for 500 years. Why not by those deeds? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in this infinite wisdom, this all-encompassing wisdom, He says, okay, let us weigh something. Let us do a measure. And let's just use your eyesight on one half, and then your worship, right? The gift of just being able to see, to be able to see the carpet on the floor while you're praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just the gift of eyesight. And when he weighed it against his 500 years of practice, it tipped the scales in favor of just eyesight. And so he asked him again. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he went from giving him a command to enter Jannah by my mercy, then asking this man, would you like to enter Jannah by my mercy now? Or would you rather have the other thing? Right? Your works that you are so proud of. Yeah, Allah, give me, right? I'll take the mercy. I'll take the mercy. Every day, twice on Sundays, as we say. Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will unleash, He will allow, He will give for all of us to take part in, right? 99 parts of His mercy on Yawm al-Qiyamah. One part of His mercy is here on this earth. And it's said by the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that because of just this one part of mercy that is here, any mercy that you see descended upon anybody you see in the street, somebody handing somebody a cup of water that's dying of thirst, but Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he speaks specifically about it is because of that an animal does not crush their young, right? Imagine an elephant does not crush its baby under its hoof, right? It's from those manifestations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy here. And the other 99 parts, inshallah, will be unleashed on Yawm al-Qiyamah, in the Akhirah, inshallah. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that none of us be omitted from the mercy that's going to be unleashed. And your needy brother, and many of us, all of us will be in dire need of it, inshallah. There's a Bedouin who came to the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And many times the Sahaba, they were very excited. They were very happy when people who were let's say they didn't attend the gatherings of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam a lot, right? Better, it's people from the outskirts. And they described this man of having, like, disheveled, messed up hair, right? He rough around the edges, as we would say. And so he comes to the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he enters a gathering, and he says, right, give me the bare basics. What do I owe to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from my prayer? What do I owe to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? From salah. And Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he tells them, right, you have to pray 5 times a day before the 24 hours is over, on and on. He gives them the bare basics. He then goes through all the other 4, right, pillars of Islam. And so what is the Bedouin? We say Bedouin, also just a simple, regular man. What does he say to him? He says, I'm not going to do any more extra than that. I'm going to do the bare minimum than that. And he leaves the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam's company. And what does the Rasul sallallahu alayhi say about him? He says, if he has spoken the truth, meaning if he adheres to the very bare minimum of his Islam, then he will be successful. Success meaning what? He will enter Jannah, inshallah. And so my address, inshallah, in the short time that we have here, with a jacked up mouth, is that inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to stay firm upon what? Salah. 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 And I realize that many times when we are discussing and we're talking about very lofty things in the deen, very lofty realities, and these are riwayahs, these are stories that we hear about the pious, some of them offering 1,000 rakah before dhuhr hits. That many times, and even myself, I find myself, you can be overwhelmed by the level of commitment to worship that these people have. But many times we have to make sure and ensure that when we speak about the realities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our obligations specifically around salah, that we speak to the regular, everyday, masjid going people, or even not masjid going people. People who are, most of us are just trying to get to the next salah, just trying to get through the day without harming our souls, inshallah. And so on account of this Bedouin man who asks this question, he opens a door for each and every one of us to be able to say, if I do what I need to do, what's owed from me to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'll be successful. I'll have the Jannah that we have been talking about countlessly since I became Muslim. I'll have this heaven, this endless felicity that we have been talking about over and over again. I saw something a while ago. I haven't been able to speak about it. That it transformed my heart in a way that, maybe I had overlooked it. Maybe we had overlooked it. So if I say O Block, most people, the image that comes in someone's head, they think about a youngin with a Glock 19 in his hand and lock swinging, right? They're thinking about people committing homicide against their own people, whatever else people rap about. But alhamdulillah, I witnessed something. People were in the middle of an O Block project in Chicago, all black brothers and sisters. And what were they doing? They were doing what this Bedouin man was asking about. They were all lined up praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I thought to myself, now many people, they'll look at that and they say, well, what are they doing outside of this particular prayer? But those who know and those who understand the transformation that goes through the heart of just committing and committing yourself to just establishing dhuhr, especially in conditions like that, you understand that something is changing in the hearts of these people who, for many times, are cast off by the rest of society. And now we see what? Countless, youngins amongst them, entering into Islam. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. And so for us, day to day, if these folks, these young folks who have every excuse, let me be clear about this, they have every excuse to say, I can look at my environment, none of these things are really speaking to my soul. None of these people who have really shown that they really care about me, they have every excuse to say, this Allah that you are talking about, this Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that you're talking about, this reality is far from what I'm experiencing every day because I'm right in the abyss, of harm coming to me and my people. Yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He does something, and I'll reiterate this, that of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He wants immense good for a people, if He wants immense good for a person, He will drag them to prayer. He will drag them to salah first. There won't be this sort of major opening. This person then becomes a wali, this friend of God, and all of these things. that will happen first. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will manifest in the same place that they say, we know we need to send the National Guard in because how these youngers are acting. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will then begin to bring those people forth, right? Through salah, through ibadah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then after that, the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he says in the authentic tradition that what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, right? I am as my servant thinks of me. If my servant remembers me, I remember him myself. If my servant remembers me in a gathering, I remember him in a gathering larger than, bigger than that, and better than that. That if he approaches me by a handspan, I come to him by a cubit. If he comes to me by a cubit, the riwayah goes on that that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes to him by a fathom. If he comes to me walking, if my servant comes to me walking, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala figuratively runs to his servant. And one of the translations that inshallah I believe is extremely important of this, right? Inni dhan bi abdihi, I am as my servant perceives me. It's also switching that perceive, switching that think. It says, I am as my servant expects me to be. That our expectation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because what? He dragged us to salah. Some of us, many of us, countless ones of us were running in every direction whatsoever but salah prior to us becoming consistent in it. We were finding every excuse possible in the book to not pray salah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for whatever reason, in his infinite wisdom, decided to bring us to put our heads on the floor. So our job is, one, not to abandon it, but more so in these environments where salah just, for whatever reason, 10 years ago in O-Block, people wasn't taking pictures of people in the middle of the projects praying. For whatever reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought those people, inshallah, towards the salah, inshallah. Another thing recently that I saw, if people have been following this sort of freeing of Syria, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect the people of Sham and give them a true freedom, was that these prisoners in this particular prison called Sednaya, which is a concentration camp, which is tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people have had their families disappeared and murdered. That one of the prisoners who was there being starved, they're being tortured, they're being beaten, thinking the next day is going to be the day I die. He said when he was freed in the morning, he said, the fajr that I prayed, me and the other 20 people that were in the cell that I was in, the fajr that we prayed was the first fajr since their detainment that they were going to be able to stand and offer salah. Why is this? Because they used to have cameras to watch people to make sure that they couldn't pray. So they used to pray with blankets over their heads. And these people are living in this particular condition. And perhaps because of shaitan, and perhaps because of our own nufus, our own egos, souls, or what have you, they had every excuse. They had every excuse to say, yo, how could I get in this condition? Every excuse to disbelieve and abandon prayer, yet alone they're saying, even if we have to pull sheets over our head, even if we have to risk being afforded more torture, they stood fast upon their salah. They stood fast upon their salah. And so for us, regular people, consider myself amongst regular people, don't leave this thing. Don't leave this thing. It'll be the first and the last thing we're accounted for. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the first thing we're held to account for when we come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on Yawm al-Qiyamah. You say, what is our first lawyer? What is the first thing that's going to plead our case before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the first place? It's our salah. It's our salah. What we did with our 24 hours in those times when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed that we had to put our heads on the floor and supplicate to him. And the last thing I'll say is, anybody, whether you like them or not, whether you love them or not, whether you listen and laugh to their jokes or you like their personality or not, anybody who helps you facilitate this commitment and this covenant between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of salah, just simple salah 5 times, they are a beloved friend to you. They are a beloved friend to you. So those of us who are going into work, right? I'm speaking real. Those of us who are maybe in work situations for whatever reason, right, we haven't built ourselves this iman up to say, man, I gotta go pray. Go pray now. The first time might be awkward, whatever the case may be. In a few weeks, they'll get the picture. Same thing if we're amongst friends. I said this to my wife, subhanAllah. I said, there are times, right, you could be even amongst Muslims, and it could be a holier than thou thing to say, man, it's time to pray. Like, damn, what is, okay, Mr. Worshipper guy, right? But there are times when that can happen. It might not even be said, but it can be, okay, bro, sis, I see you. Oh, you're praying a lot now. This is a trick of shaitan. No, call them to pray, and then you pray. You ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to deal with, our particular sincerity, inshallah. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that when we do pray, it is counted amongst the most sincerest of our actions, right? And then that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He allows us to continue to pray today, that we continue it on for the rest of our life, inshallah. Very simple things in our deen. The second very simple thing in our deen, yet and still, it is abandoned very much. It is abandoned very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما صليت على ابراهيم وعلى ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما باركت على ابراهيم وعلى ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد يا عباد الله إن أوصيكم وإياي بتقوى الله إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيدا وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. Inshallah, the last thing is just a community address. It's a community address. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed us and afforded us the opportunity to learn how to pray. And so we thank and we applaud the sisters, alhamdulillah, who've conducted and are conducting classes for prayer, to learn how to pray, right? So if you could look at this as some sort of spiritual Olympics, you could look at all the events that one could take part in. Every single one of us can become a gold medalist at praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Every single one of us. It is right. There's no like skill or whatever the case may be. It's just our sincerity and us learning how to do it. So even if we've been praying all our lives, there's always some more perfection that we can attain from it, inshallah. So there will be classes, and there will be more classes for people to learn how to pray. The most important thing, the first thing that we're asked about on Day of Judgment, there will be classes about it. It will behoove us, and it will be intelligent, right? One could say somebody is aqil, right? Somebody smart, they're intelligent, to learn about that first thing that we're going to be asked about on the Day of Judgment, inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase our sincerity and allow the masses to come and learn how to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا وأخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون وذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تفعلون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what we do. إقام الصلاة.